Back in 2020, I made a video talking about a wheel chock. You might put your vehicle in park, set your parking brake. As you're winching up your boat, if your boat's heavy or that ramp is steep, your vehicle could release for one reason or another. Sometimes it's just because the ramp is slippery and wet. So this is an extra little bit of insurance to make sure you're not one of those people who shows up on one of those boat ramp fail videos. I made that video based completely on observational research. I hadn't actually tested to see whether or not a wheel chock would work. So the first test I did was near the top of my boat ramp where it's not very steep. I put the wheel chock behind my tire, put my truck in neutral, took my foot off the parking brake, and my truck didn't roll back. The wheel chock worked. Now I'm located much farther down my boat ramp where it's steeper. I'm gonna set the wheel chock and let's see how it does. I'm gonna release the parking brake, put it in neutral, and it is holding. So it held there as well. So now I've got my truck very close to the water. I'm at the bottom of the boat ramp and it's steeper here. I'm not at the steepest part right as we touch the water, but let's see how it does here. Set my wheel chock the same as I've done every other time. There. And I'll put my truck in neutral and we'll see what happens. So as you see at the very bottom of my boat ramp, where it's the steepest, it failed. I rolled right over it in neutral. Where I'm actually having to keep my truck sitting when I'm launching and retrieving my boat, the wheel chock is completely ineffective at my boat ramp. Part of me wanted to pull my original video to say, it doesn't work, it's ineffective. But it really depends on the steepness, is that a correct word, of your boat ramp. So you've seen where the wheel chock has worked for me and the wheel chock has failed. Let's talk about how to test if a wheel chock works for you, what to do if you can't use a wheel chock, and 3, how to avoid losing or driving over your wheel chock. Unfortunately, the only real way to test whether or not a wheel chock will work for you at your boat ramp is to get a wheel chock and actually try it out with your vehicle in the most ideal situation. So for example, with a trailer attached, with the boat on it, at the part of your ramp where you would be launching or pulling your boat. That's the best way to actually see if it'll work. Because every wheel chock is different, and every vehicle is different, and every ramp is different. So that's the best way to do it. Please test it out. If you're on a limited budget, like many of us are, go with the cheapest wheel chock that you can find. The cheapest one that I can find is at Harbor Freight. That's the one that I'm using. It's $9. So it's a $9 investment to try to see if a wheel chock will work for me. But there are also wheel chocks that you can buy that cost $100. There's slightly different angles and sizes and those types of things. So if you find that the rubber wheel chock doesn't work for you, but you really want the comfort of using a wheel chock, then investigate one that's larger or more heavy duty and try to see if something like that would work for you. But you have to test for yourself because there's no way that anybody can know for sure whether or not a specific wheel chock will work with a specific vehicle on a specific ramp without trying it out. So obviously for some of us, a wheel chock is not going to work. That brings us to our next point. What do we do if a wheel chock doesn't work for us? Well, I'm going to show you right now. This is one of those situations where keeping our wits about us whenever we're at the boat ramp is what's most important. Always making sure, if you have an automatic transmission, that you're putting your vehicle in park and making sure that it has clicked into park and engaged, that you are activating and using your parking brake, that your parking brake works properly. Those are all what a lot of people call no-brainer things, but people forgetting to do one of those things because they're in a rush or they feel pressured at the boat ramp is part of the reason why we do see vehicles that end up in the water at a boat ramp, and we don't want that to happen to us. So if I have somebody with me, I actually have them in the vehicle just holding the brake pedal down, because that's keeping all four wheels, you know, as tight as they can to the boat ramp. If you don't have a person to do that, you can use a stick or a bar or a T-shaped bracket or something that you fabricate to jam between the brake pedal and your driver's seat. So the idea is that you wedge something from your brake pedal in its depressed position to your seat. So for example, this pole here would need to be cut a little bit shorter to be able to be wedged in between this and the seat. I know some people make these out of 2x4s, so they'll cut a 2x4 that's the exact right length and maybe mount a little T-shaped top and bottom to it to make it sort of like an I-beam, so that way it sits more squarely on the brake pedal and presses up on a wider surface on their seat. And then just push the seat forward to make sure that the brake pedal is all the way depressed. I think it's a neat trick. But let's say you go with the wheel chock idea. Let's talk about ways to avoid losing your wheel chock or having your trailer drive over it. The simplest way to do that is to tie a line to it. This is based on a viewer's recommendation. I have a carabiner attached to the other end. My line is a relatively specific length. That way it doesn't drag too far behind my truck where my boat trailer wheel could hit it. And if I end up using it at the front of my vehicle, it doesn't drag so far back as to hit the back tire. Another thing somebody told me is they said that the bumpy end of my wheel chock should be what's on the ground and this should be on the tire. If I use it the other way, this angle is not as steep. If I use it this way, the angle is more steep. So I like that because I feel like that holds the tire a bit better. So the way I use it is, I actually usually use it on the driver's side, even though I had it on the passenger side for the earlier demo. And then I can just hook this right up here where, you know, one of these brackets are. There's other places to hook it to on my vehicle. When I get to the top of the ramp and this is dragging behind my vehicle, that's also where I'm going to be doing things like strapping everything down, securing my outboard motor, shutting off my fuel systems, taking the keys out of my boat, all those other kinds of things that you do before heading back home. And so obviously one of the steps to do at that time is to untie this, so that way you're not dragging it down the highway, endangering some other people. So the takeaway from this is, if you do plan to use a wheel chock, test it to see if it actually does do anything where you're located. Because at my ramp down by the water, it really doesn't do anything. But if my ramp was as steep as it is right here, it totally works. So I think I am going to keep my original video up about the wheel chock, because for some of us, it does work. If your ramp is not really, really steep like mine, it can work just fine. And I guess really that's what it comes down to is, even though you might get advice from me and be learning stuff from me, remember, I am still learning all the time myself. And on top of that, every situation is different and our applications are different. And even if you learn some tips and tricks from watching YouTube videos like mine, your actual real life applications may be different. Your boat may be bigger or smaller or heavier. Your river, your creek, the waters you boat in may be very different than mine. So whatever you do, try to use some common sense and possibly test things out in your own environment. just to see how well they work for you, because sometimes what works for me in my situation might not work for you. Anyway, here's another video for you to check out right here. YouTube's picked this one just for you, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.